given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they want to do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shit.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, I got a good request that came through my Facebook. Yeah, it was my Facebook Messenger. So we were talking about books on a recent episode and certain books that were banned. And one of them was the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Now, by the way, I have all of Robert Greene's books, and so does my guest Connie. We're avid readers of his books. They're very good books. Now, of course, there was some feedback like, why do these books have to be banned? Inmates should be allowed to read these types of books. And the thing is there's certain things about these books here. And by the way, they are great books, but they do teach people how to get over. That's the key. So in our profession, in order to protect staff, we do want to make sure that inmates don't have access to things that can help them maneuver around the people that work the system, again, for safety and security. So me and Connie are going to do a series of videos, probably 5 videos, and we're going to talk about just 5 laws. So this will only be one. And we're going to talk about 5 laws ultimately, through the series, but we're going to cover one today where we can showcase why we feel that this book could be a concern for the staff if inmates are allowed to have it. The funny thing is not all facilities banned this book. Not all facilities have these books banned. So if by chance your facility allows it, you guys should read it. The material in this book is very, very interesting. But again, we're going to point out 5 laws. Again, we're just going to do one today, but we're going to do a series. And we're going to show you why this could be detrimental to us in the profession, because we're going to kind of take these laws and we are going to apply it to our lives behind the wall, which, by the way, if I'm an inmate and let's say I'm a lifer or whatever it is, and I'm reading the 48 Laws of Power, where do you think I'm going to apply these laws? Where I'm at, in the prison. So again, this is going to be a great dialogue. Connie, another Robert Greene fan. Oh, do you know Robert Greene now because you're the successful author? Because I would like to have him on the show.
No, I do not know Robert Greene. I wish that I knew Robert Greene and I could pick his brain because his work is amazing. Yeah, so I'm absolutely, I can't wait to talk about it, just because I think when you think about power, just the word power, it's a very sensitive word, I think, in corrections. And for any inmate to feel empowered, definitely can create problems for the staff, all of the staff, civilians, custody, all. So I think we just want to be very mindful of, how this book is being viewed. If in fact, I know a lot of facilities, it is banned, but, if anyone does have access, because when I first heard about the book, I heard about the book from an inmate.
Right now, Connie, obviously, so you guys know, Connie has a book out called The Cage Was Her Cocoon. She is the founder of the Civilians Corrections Academy. She is the podcast host for The Fly Behind the Wall and Conversations with Connie. I have not been on either one. Oh but I am in her book. I'm the forward in her book.
See, and that's more important. Exactly.
I'll take the book. Even though I think they have equal value, the book is popular right now, so I'll take the book. Notice the shirt. Cage Was Her Cocoon shirt. Well done. Well played. I'll wear mine. Hopefully, I just got to get it back from my mother because I gave it to my mom. But guys, when we come back, we're going to discuss 1 law today, and then we are going to discuss 4 more after that, just to show you, just to highlight, why this book could be a concern for our correctional facilities. Now, again, most people think it's not. We're going to tell you why we think it is. And the law we're going to discuss is Law 43, work on the hearts and mind of others. Now, guys, if you're in corrections and you hear that, that has the potential for a problem. Now, guys, if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you, brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsors. Then we're going to come back and discuss Law 43 of the 48 Laws of Power. Stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description. All right, and we are back. So me and Connie, what we're doing, and we're going to keep this episode quick, hopefully. Yeah, hopefully. Never trust an LY word, though. I'll tell you that right now. You know, the LY words are not to be trusted. I picked this law today. Connie will be the one that picks the next one we do. Maybe for the next one, we'll have Russ Hamilton sit in on with us too, because he's the one that we talked about the books and why they were banned. Now, Connie mentioned an inmate brought her attention to this book. For me, same thing. I was working a housing unit and I just saw this book pretty much being passed around. So out of curiosity, I picked it up and bought it. Thought the book was phenomenal. Did actually think that some of the material could be used against me if you didn't know about it. So I just started recommending it to other people, whether they were reading it or not, I can't tell you. But eventually the book did become banned. I think as other states started catching on to it, the book was banned. Oh, California may have been one of the first states to do that, but don't quote me. I don't know how Robert Greene took it though, but hopefully he understands why. I mean, these are books about seduction and power and corrections. You know, you don't want to give the inmates that leverage. And if by chance, again, guys, if somebody allows them to read this book, pick up these books, because this book could be an offense or it could be a defense. And we're going to kind of read it today from a defensive perspective. So let me just read the caveat. It's called Judgment. Now, real quick, how he writes his books, just to give you a little summary here, is that he writes the law, the judgment, and then he writes the transgression or the observance of the law. Transgressions means when the law wasn't utilized properly or just not utilized at all, and it just doesn't work. Observance is, yes, this is how it needs to be done, how the law works, and he uses periods of history to explain that. And then he goes into keys to power, which is a breakdown of how this could be applied now in reality. But the key I want to mention here is that some of the laws that he has reversals, which means that the law has a limit, you know. So some laws you could utilize, but you could overutilize it. This law has no reversal. This is a law about connecting to human emotion. That means if an inmate masters this law on staff, there is no reversal to this. So that's how dangerous this law is. So again, and I'm sure most of my correctional staff know why this law is a problem right off the bat, but just to break it down. So law 43 is work on the hearts and minds of others. And I just want to read the judgment part before we have our dialogue. So the judgment is this. This is just a breakdown of what the law is. Coercion creates a reaction that will eventually work against you. You must seduce others into wanting to move in your direction. A person you have seduced becomes your loyal pawn. And the way to seduce others is to operate on the individual psychologies and weaknesses. Soften up the resistance by working on their emotions, playing on what they hold dear and what they fear. Ignore the hearts and minds of others, and they will grow to hate you. Now, Connie, you working in corrections. Now, we kind of know what this interprets face value. We know what that is. But you working in corrections, if an inmate was to read that and really get an understanding of Law 43, how could they apply that into the correctional setting?
So, I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is the fact that the inmates are always observing us, right? Like we are always on stage and they observe everything we do. They observe our responses. They observe what makes us angry, whatever emotion we feel throughout the day. So for an inmate to kind of be able to key in to any of our emotions at any particular time, that in of itself could make us extremely vulnerable. So, you and I talked a little bit about this prior to, and one of the things, I think is, this environment can be very stressful. It could actually, burn us out at times. And for that individual who might be feeling overly stressed or burnt out, if this inmate has really understood this particular law, I could see this inmate using this law to seduce that person that's almost isolating themselves from the group, right? Because they're feeling burnt out, they're feeling stressed and all those things. And not seduce in a sexual way, but seduce in the way of giving the individual sort of the reinforcement that they need, like whatever that positivity that they need, or maybe they even need to know someone else agrees with them, right? Someone else is on their side. And I feel like as the inmate kind of makes their way in, and certainly not blatantly sitting and having, I would hope not blatantly sitting and having conversations, but it could really just be these one-off interactions that they'll have to sort of engage the officer or the staff person to just kind of see where they're at, see what they're feeling. And I think the closer that the inmate can get to the emotions, the more that inmate is able to make a connection where they could relate, or, just these little gems that brings them a little bit closer in the door. And we talk all the time about manipulation and how it's a slow and subtle process. And I feel like this is no different than that.
Yeah, I love what you're saying here, because we're talking about, we said it before in the car, visceral empathy. We're talking about a connection that's not based on the intellect or an interest, but rather based on an emotion, which is a deeper connection. So when you have an inmate that's able to read the emotion of staff and they connect with that staff member based on that emotion, that is a very, very powerful connection, and that's pretty much what this book or this law is saying. It's the connection of that emotion. And I love what you said with the seduction. The seduction is the charm of it all, making it seem that I'm interested in you. Who doesn't want to be that center sometimes? Who doesn't want to have, the focus on them once in a while? And there's something else. Now, guys, another thing about the 48 Laws of Power is its power moves. And me and Connie talked about this before, the perception of authority. We have to protect power at all costs. Now, this book here is written for you how to gain power. So having said that, when the inmates read these laws, including Law 43, it's telling them this is how you want to gain power in a world where you may not have that power. So now, even if you're not looking for power, which I doubt most people are to some sense or form, but let's say just on the extreme that you're not, this is still a good book to make sure you don't give up what you already have, the power that you already have. And I love this quote that he says here in one of the keys to power. He says, in the game of power, you're surrounded by people who have absolutely no reason to help you unless it's in their interest to do so. This is strictly our environment. I don't know if he wrote this book. I don't think he wrote this book thinking about how inmates can get overstaffed. So Robert Greene, we forgive you. But Connie, that hits home. We are surrounded by people that they don't have power. They want it. And even more about them wanting it, there's a reason why they want it. So, what do you feel? You want me to read it again, or what do you feel about that?
No, so, I think so when we think about the reason why they want it, right? So they want access to things that they simply can't have. They want access to things that will give them leverage or power in other areas, not necessarily power over the staff, right? Like they've got a whole life, a whole subculture of politics that they're navigating. And if in fact they could in any way, shape, or form somehow get a staff person to cross those professional boundaries to allow them in to an extent so that they're kind of leaning towards the inmate as opposed to leaning towards their colleagues, that in of itself is a win for the inmate, because they're gaining some of the leverage and power, or at least the semblance. So it looks like to other inmates that they are gaining in this area. And I think that's where it becomes very dangerous, because they allow for the look and feel of there being some sort of power or leverage that they might have with a particular employee. I think one of the things that I read was it was talking about like the human struggle to feel connected. And so when you are in situations where you're feeling isolated, or if you're in a situation where you're feeling misunderstood, and then you have someone who's sort of giving you encouragement, right? I mean, the influence that some may have, we may think it's not intentional, but I've always taken it as, if an inmate says something to me, it's because they have an intention behind it. And I feel that in that intention, sometimes we just have to be mindful that the intention could just be that they are trying to get the power from us, whatever that power looks like for them.
Yeah, Connie, you know what's funny too? Even as you read, like, as again, they break into two stories. One's in a transgression, a failure. One's an observance, which is the success part. At the end of the interpretation of the successful story, he says this: in all your encounters, take a step back, take the time to calculate and attune yourself to your target's emotional makeup and psychological weakness. Now, by the way, he says to your target. We talk about that manipulation, to your target. Force will only strengthen their resistance. With most people, the heart is the key. They are like children, ruled by their emotions. To soften them up, alternate harshness with mercy, play on their basic fears and also their love, freedom, family, etc. Once you break them down, you will have a lifelong friend and a fiercely loyal ally. Let me just say this. Let's say I'm doing a tour in my facility and we're having book club. And all of a sudden, I'm an officer and I hear this being discussed at the inmate book club. I actually may say, hey guys, I think I have a little problem with that. Because you're teaching people. One thing is how to connect with staff, in my opinion, on a very intimate level, to make them confused, because you can see there's a level of fear and love. Fear and love. That sounds like leverage to me. Like, hey, I'll do whatever you want. Oh, by the way, I got some leverage. If you don't do for me, I'm going to turn you in. But I got. But
it's also about disarming people, right? So you no longer see me as a threat, right? Like, I've been able to disarm you. Like, I think about, so there was I had a situation where there was a staff person who would come in, and at the front gate, the officer, she would like make small talk with the officer all the time. And then she started to bring him a coffee. And like, it was just this everyday kind of exchange. And like, when he was supposed to be checking her car, like, he wasn't, right? Like, it was, anyway, long story short, it was the disarming that she created this sense of familiarity. Like, we're cool. Like, it was, here's your coffee, right? Like, so now there's this thoughtful, and it's no longer about work. It's about, I care about you sitting in the booth outside in the cold, and I'm bringing you a warm cup of coffee just the way you like it, right? And so, although here is my role, right? Like, we still have to think that these gestures, just as we would see inmates do, have a tendency to disarm us. Right. And so I think that's why it's so dangerous, as he talks about connecting to weaknesses and like your psychologies and your feelings, as opposed to anything else.
Right. And he says individual psychology, which shows that it's crafted. It's not a generalized approach. It's really getting to know your target. He says it there. And guys, I just want to tell you something. Just, the words itself are important. This is a target here. So think about someone that's in a prison right now looking for power. The target is staff, because staff is what holds the power. It's what holds the key. And he's talking about, as I said, the connection on such a personal and intimate level. Some of us wear our emotions on our sleeves. Not that, we should be doing that, but we do. And what they could do is they could really connect off that emotion and then relate to the situation. You know what I mean? So if I have an issue with the job, like I remember you mentioned this on the way, when we were discussing this on the way home from work for myself, if I'm disgruntled and I'm angry and I'm wearing my emotions on my sleeves and the inmates can see that, they could share in with that emotion by either one of two things. One is they could share in the heated side of it all, so now, I can understand why you're upset, and kind of feed off the heated emotions of the anger, or they could come in with compassion to soothe the beast. But I'll guarantee you, whichever way it's employed, just like he says in here, just like what you were saying, the attention is focused on that individual.
It's going to be the best way that individual will receive it.
Right. And I think you came up with the best metaphor in how to explain that when you talked about yoga.
Oh.
Yeah, but it explains it. And I want to see if you could break it in, but just real quick, just to paint a picture, guys, is the relationship, like the dialogue that's being exchanged is really about the individual who is the target. It's about how can I connect with that person, but more importantly, how can I make that person feel that they have value? And then here's the key to it all, guys. Here's the trick. This is the trick to Law 43 with connecting to the minds and hearts, is if I connect this person to their value and to their self-esteem, then every time they think high about themselves, every time they put themselves in an elevated position where they're reminded of their importance and their value, they're going to think about that connection to that, which is going to be the inmate who reinforced it by using Law 43. But can you explain the yoga example real quick?
Sure. So the example was there's a conversation between two people, and one person talks about, oh, I love doing yoga and blah, blah, blah. And usually someone else might chime in and say, oh, yeah, but, I like playing basketball. But in this law 43, it is the person saying, I love doing yoga. And then it's saying, oh, you look really good. I could tell you do yoga. Right. And so because you're giving that positive reinforcement that the person is probably looking for, the connection is different. And so every time that person thinks about yoga, they start to think about, someone thinks that I look like I do yoga, like I'm getting the results that I need to get, or whatever that feeling, that positive feeling is. And so, as you just said, they start relating that positive feeling to the person who gave them the positive reinforcement.
Right. Now, I want you guys to think about this anytime you approach with an inmate that's overly friendly, that's trying to show some connection to that emotion, maybe giving you a compliment, because again, they're focusing on you, which again, some people like to be have that center of attention. But the key is that they're actually going after that power. I don't care how friendly they are. They're making it to that point where maybe that one moment when you have to give me a no, you're going to stop and think about it first, when the no should be automatic. And that's the key, guys. That's how it starts. Because once you give that no, and then, they make you feel guilty for it, because, hey, I've done this for you, or, I always talk highly of you, or, well, it's okay, I understand. I thought we had a little bit of a connection, whatever it is. The moment you start hesitating, giving that no, because, oh man, I can't believe I'm going to have to tell inmate Diaz no. Well, what makes inmate Diaz different than inmate Gangi? What makes inmate Diaz different than inmate Alleyne? Once you start thinking like that, then there has been a connection there that crosses into the undo. And I think Law 43, the danger, again, just to kind of recap here, the danger is it's a very intimate connection on the emotions of an individual. I mean, this is not like 101, guys. This dialogue here is very deep. This is, we talked about manipulation before, and we kind of touch on this in the book as well, but we talk about similar interest, connecting on with both the fans of the Giants. I mean, that's an interest. That can come and go. Emotions could be everlasting. If you ever have a memory connected to an emotion, you'll remember it forever. That's just the power of an emotion. So now, if this person comes in when you're feeling good or when you're feeling bad, they put themselves in a position where if they're able to connect with you on that emotion, they put themselves in a position to be ever present in your mind. How scary is that, guys, to be ever present in your mind? You know, Connie, even though the book says that there's no reversal to the Law 43, again, we can kind of look at it differently, because the reversal will come into play is if we decide to use that law against the inmate. But again, the inmate's not really in a position of power, and I wouldn't recommend that. But I will say there are times where you may be able to have an influence on an inmate if you happen to be there around the positive moments that happen in the facility for them, which are probably going to be rare, but it does happen. And believe it or not, because it's rare, the positive emotion's heightened. Inmate that graduates, you know, from school or from a program, they may take that as a very positive moment for them. And if you're able to connect to that moment with them and even just give some reinforcement, like, hey, great job, I knew you can do it, something as simple as that, you're connected in the moment of something positive, you know. And maybe there could be, and this is where, again, I don't want to use this as a game, because I think there really are positive moments that if we have a chance to reinforce, we should. But there could be a chance that if the person connects with themselves, with you, towards those positive moments, then there's a good chance that you can continue to have a positive influence. Again, not to manipulate, but just to say, hey, you know, try to do this instead of that. So does that make any sense? I mean,
so it does, you know, as I'm thinking about it, I feel like this could be sort of where we could use the power in a positive way, right? Which is really what I'm thinking, that when you can really understand the true concept or the intent of this particular law, that you could flip it on its head and start to be that person that will acknowledge them when they're doing good, because essentially we are reinforcing positive behavior. I think the only challenge, I know there's a law, I'm going to find which one it is. I think the only challenge is that there is one law that talks about if you pretend to be like the model citizen, right? It's playing the perfect
courtier.
Yes. I think that's the one where if we are thinking about the different laws and how they could counter each other, or depending on how we utilize the different laws, I think that there's a way that we could be providing that positive reinforcement. And then you have the inmate who may be intentionally sharing these positive moments to create like that connection in the with the emotion, right? So like, I feel like this is one of those slippery slopes where we want to be in full command of the law, and that we've done our due diligence too, to kind of really know what we're working with as far as the personality or psychology of that particular inmate. So I certainly can see how we can flip that law and use it in a positive manner. But I can also see if the inmate's playing possum, right? If they're only pretending to be doing good. I mean, so the graduation is something solid, right? But are there other good things that you might want to positively reinforce? And could they at any point manipulate that? So we know there's always possibilities, but I think as we dig deeper into some of these laws, we're going to start to really see and understand sort of how they can be utilized in different situations.
Right. And it was Law 24, by the way. But yeah, I agree. I think that, again, this could go to the people that kind of, I still think custody could be involved in a positive reinforcement as well, but also the rehabilitative side. You know, if there's a positive event, then you want to make sure that we reinforce that positivity and connect with that. And I really do think that if you're sharing something positive, and that is the way, I mean, here's another thing about these emotional connections. And again, within our professional realm, is that emotional connections also open the person up to share that successes with that person. So they start connecting that positive to that person, especially if that person becomes the first person they talk to. So imagine being a teacher of a school or a program provider, and you have an inmate that's doing well. And the moment they do something good, even if it's outside what you do, they go and tell you, hey, Connie, guess what? I know you're running the drug programs, but hey, I just got my high school diploma. So they're connecting their positive successes with you, and that's a good chance that you can have that influence on them to remain positive. Because now, again, the positive moment is shared. I think that does matter, but you have to remember that prescribed role. And I like what you said, know the motivation behind it. Make sure that it is something that is positive, that we're sharing, and that you're not being taken advantage of. So again, these laws are, there's a fine line. And look how we would tend to use it. When we first opened it, we would say for the inmates, nefarious reasons. For us, we just totally went into a positive light. So it goes to show you, if you put this books in the hands of someone who can do good, could be powerful. Mm-hmm. But if you put it in the hands of someone who has a motive that's not so good, it could be destructive. Hey, Connie, anything you want to say in closing?
I just want to say, like, this conversation, it was really good in that, like, I mean, I'm thinking about the laws now and, just different ways that we've probably seen them play out in real life, like play out in the facilities, and not really assign a law to it, because that's not a book that we would usually equate to corrections, right? But it's actually very viable. It's like, wow. So the fact that we're having this conversation and we're seeing how a lot of these studies and all this stuff that seems to be outside of corrections is actually very present in our world. So, like, I appreciate this dialogue.
Yeah, I know you're going to come up with the next law. We'll do 5 just to show people why it's not a joke, when they ban these books. And I think when they're written, the books are written for a particular audience, but they don't realize that when you write these books, especially with these books that try to push influence on other people, how those books could affect the prison setting with the officers that need to, or the staff members that need to maintain that level of authority. And now you're teaching people to maneuver around it, which could be very dangerous for us in that environment. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Hey, wait, before I go to a close, maybe one day, see, what I like about Connie's book, let's say Inmate got a hold of Connie's book. Oh, that was happening. But there's nothing there that maneuvers around every people. Let me just say something about Connie's book real quick. Connie's book is not about using other people to gain an advantage. It's about finding the best in yourself. So I'm going to go ahead and allow that book in my facility. As always, guys, the show is Tear Talk. Stay safe.